Hi, a major release I watched this weekend was a new film added to Netflix, Scoop, the adaptation of Sam McAllister's non-fiction biography of how the Newsnight interview with Prince Andrew in 2019 came about. It has an all-star cast. McAllister herself is played by Billie Piper. Newsnight presenter Emily Maitlis is played by Gillian Anderson. Prince Andrew is played by Rufus Sewell under some very strange and convincing prosthetics. And his chief of staff, a seemingly adoring, gullible dupe, is played by Keeley Hawes. We see the process of how the interview came about, that Jeffrey Epstein was an ongoing figure in the wake of the Me Too movement, and that what his arrest and then sudden death in custody meant that his previous relationship with Prince Andrew was now being very closely scrutinized. So McAllister, as the film claims, managed to reach out to Buckingham Palace and persuade them that the best way for Andrew to clear the air was to be interviewed on Newsnight, and a special edition broadcast in November 2019, which had the exact opposite effect of what he'd intended, as Andrew is now basically an international pariah. Although the story of how the interview came about is very interesting, and I think portrayed generally very well, it is notable that the hero of the story is the one who wrote the book on which this film is based. Basically, a well connected fixer who had little actual involvement in the interview itself. That was mainly the work of the program's producer, segment director, and Maitlis, who is portrayed as very much a force to be reckoned with, although a journalist of great integrity and intelligence. Andrew himself is living in a bubble of absolute self delusion and arrogance. Sewell is terrific, playing a very believable arsehole, I think is possibly the best term. Someone who yells at a maid for putting his teddy bears on his pillow in the wrong order, but also is completely deluded about how well the interview goes, claiming that he's unable to sweat following an incident during the Falklands War, or that his alibi for one apparent incident being taking his daughter to a party at Pizza Express in Woking, all of which he thinks goes entirely well and is then shocked when it blows up in his face. It's not a particularly great film. I think there is a certain self-congratulatory element, with a speech at the end about why Newsnight is so important, a program that is now on the verge itself of being removed from the airways. And it does feel like journalists patting themselves on the back about something which has had little measurable impact. Yes, Andrew is now basically an international pariah, but it hasn't really gone any further than that. None of Epstein's other associates have been closely investigated. None of their victims have been given their due in court or been allowed to tell their story in public. And basically, the rich continuing to get away with things. It is a story that's worth telling, particularly due to the sheer delusion of people in power thinking that they can get away with anything and then are surprised when they're caught short. And there is another version of this story currently in development, a very royal scandal, a three-part series being made by Amazon, in which Maitlis is played by Ruth Wilson and the Prince by Michael Sheen. But it's really not good enough on its own. There is strong material here, there are strong performances here, it's a well-made film, but ultimately it's just not enough.